مش قادر. Can you go ahead with the green focus?
It's Macondo Leads, First 24. This afternoon we have Yvonne, Adhiambo, Owuor moderating this session, which is Enchanted Waters, literally Glimmerings of the Boundless Sea. Yvonne, take it away.
It's a crazy story, and I was quite upset on her behalf, but she turned it into gold by writing a book about it. Anyway, Shubnum Khan is a South African writer and artist whose storytelling gorgeously straddles the realms. We shall be exploring this with her new novel, The Jinn Waits 100 Years. Show them. A sweeping, literary, gothic coming-of-age novel set on the east coast of South Africa. Khan's debut novel, Onion Tears, was shortlisted for the Penguin Prize for African Writing. But with The Jinn Waits 100 Years, Khan brings us an atmospheric, spellbinding tale set in a haunted mansion on the coast of Durban. And she blends history, marvelous reality, I said marvelous reality, not magical realism, and a tender exploration of love, loss, and eerie untold histories that linger in the spaces of our forgetting. Welcome, Shubnum, both to Nairobi and to Macondo. A couple of questions. Let's start from the beginning. Question number one, and this is each one of you, so that our beloved audience can hear your voices. What does enchantment mean to you? Khadija, I'll start with you.
Hello. What a joy to be in conversation with everyone here. Moments ago, a bird just flew into the room there. I couldn't quite tell what its colors were. It wasn't a crow, it was some other kind of bird I've never seen before, and then it disappeared. Yes, I consider that enchantment. Perhaps the word enchantment evokes this idea of magical, or perhaps even as an evil spell being put on someone. But enchantment to me, I think, Yvonne, you mentioned watching ants. As a kid, I was prone to being enchanted by a lot of things. I watched ants so much. I watched my own shadow on the floor. I think enchantment is anything that winds itself around your heart with a sense of wonder, and it leads not necessarily to rational thought in the brain, but a kind of a whimsicalness that is almost approaching love, innocent, yes, and I feel that is maybe what enchantment might be, a willingness to be delighted as well.
Thank you so much. How beautiful is that? I'll keep that in mind. And you, Shubnum, what does enchantment mean to you? But also, I think because I've laid the foundations of that Twitter story, maybe tell us a little bit about that. Then you can tell us what enchantment means to you.
The quick version of this stock photo story, which I hate telling, is I had basically signed away the rights to my photo without realizing it in university, and someone in Canada had seen me in an advert and said, "You're welcoming immigrants into the country, why are you here?" And I realized that this photographer who had done a project that day and had taken like 100 photos of different people had sold these photos as stock photos. And when I reverse Google the image, my image had come up for tooth whitening adverts and acne adverts, and they could change my name, so I would be like, I'm Dina M, and after my pregnancy I used this cream and my skin came right, and it was in McDonald's adverts in China and Singapore and all over. It was very crazy how the image had been sold all highways in India. And the thing is, it was embarrassing because the story went viral and it went on BBC and CNN, and people were commenting and saying, how stupid is this writer who doesn't read the fine print of what she signs, because I thought I had been signing it away for a project that this photographer was doing. And so the photo ended up in ridiculous places, and it went a bit viral, and that's how Yvonne knows me.
But as I say, she got her revenge by writing a beautiful book.
And then to answer your question about what I think enchantment is, I mean, it's very much, I think, linked to what Khadija said. It's, you know, for me, it's having a sense of wonder about everything. And I really think it comes back to that thing of being a child and seeing the world through a child's eyes. And what does everything hold? I still remember what that was like just lying on the grass and sitting and dreaming about the future. What does the future hold? What can happen? Anything can happen, you know, and it's so exciting when you think anything can happen. And I do try to like go into the day with that, like that feeling, like even as I get into the elevator out of the hotel, coming here, I'm like, anything can happen, and there's a small prayer I read in Arabic, which for me, I think makes me feel like, God, give me anything that can happen, like what can happen, and I think it's important to live your life like that, because then anything can happen, and then you can end up as a stock photo in McDonald's in China, and you just don't know. But with that example aside, you know, I think if you can open yourself up to any experience, then life does open up that door, and so that for me is enchantment or wonder.
Beautiful, thank you for that. And Johary, enchantment, what does it mean for you?
Bonjour à tous. Je suis ravi d'être là au Macondo Literary Festival. Ça, c'est un enchantement. Être ici avec vous, c'est un vrai enchantement. Parce que je ne m'imaginais pas pouvoir venir au Kenya, à Nairobi, parler d'un livre que j'ai écrit il y a longtemps et me trouver ici, avoir ce plaisir de partager ce livre-là maintenant.
Hello everybody. I'm very happy to be at the Macondo Literature Festival, and that in itself is a delight, is an enchantment to be here. To be able to speak about a book that I wrote many years ago and to share that with you. So it really is a pleasure to share this experience together.
J'utilise aussi beaucoup les enchantements dans mes écrits parce que je viens de Madagascar et à Madagascar, il y a le monde réel et le monde invisible. Et même si on n'est pas obligé de croire à ce monde invisible-là, mais beaucoup de Malagasy y croient et ça influe sur leur façon d'être, leur façon de vivre. Et du coup, je dois transposer ça dans mes écrits. Et l'enchantement y aide beaucoup, raconter le merveilleux.
Enchantment is very present in my writing. I come from Madagascar, and in Madagascar, it's a place where we live in the real world, and many people also live in an invisible world. So not everybody has to believe in this other world, but many people do, and it influences their way of being, their way of living. And so my sense of writing from that place is that I'm also able to live that enchantment and communicate it in my writing.
Again, absolutely beautiful, yeah. Khadija, does the ocean enchant you? And what do you call the ocean? Do you have a special name for it? And linked to that question, can the ocean also be a library for you?
So the first question was?
Does the ocean enchant you?
Yes. The ocean is perhaps the only thing that is never mundane at home. You can lose interest in a lot of things, but the ocean surrounds, it's everywhere. I watch it constantly. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about Mombasa, because we're an island. You can often see the sea at really any point, either between the buildings or from on top. So yes, the ocean, I don't know, I think it enchants me. I watch it a lot. As for a name, these conversations about names have been really interesting to me because they didn't enter my consciousness when I was younger. When we used to talk about the sea, we just used to say Baharini, the sea. But I did understand it as the Indian Ocean growing up in geography. And I think it was actually you, Ms. Yvonne, who opened my eyes to the idea of Swahili seas. I saw you use that, I heard you use that phrase, and I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. India is very far. We are very connected with India. But Swahili seas, because when I think about the ocean, I think about the coast, Mombasa, south coast, north coast, it's everywhere. So the idea of the Swahili seas kind of fit something with me. I came from an earlier talk with Dr. Mshai Mongola, and she said something very interesting about names. She said, there are two ways of naming things, or two ways of thinking about names. What we have named things in the past, the many things that things have been named, and visioning for the future. I'm paraphrasing, doing my best. The intentionality of naming things and essentially envisioning what a thing could be, so the power to give names for the future. I thought that was really interesting. So it's still those kind of ideas, being exposed to those kind of ideas are still kind of helping me form my own. But in general, the sea has always been just Bahari to me, yes. But I am very much connected with this idea of it being the Swahili seas, yes.
I like that. I'd like you also, the audience, to think about your own sense of the sea, the names you also have for the sea. Just think about it. Again, towards the end, we'll probably do a quick survey of what names have come to mind. Shubnum, in this, our first encounter of the southern and eastern African sea, she's from South Africa, so you're imagining that the seas are meeting here. First, welcome again. Right now, we're welcoming the oceans. How do the seas, as a historical and cultural crossroad, shape the stories you tell, shape the characters that show up in your story, and even shape your identity? Had you ever thought of the Eastern Sea before?
So I've lived by the sea in Durban my whole life, and I think I took the sea for granted. We only went to the sea when my cousins from Johannesburg would come down, and then we'd go to the sea. Otherwise, we didn't swim in the ocean. And I think I took it for granted for a long time. But I think as I got older, and life gets more complex, and you start to know yourself or unknow yourself or whatever it is, and you realize how complex the sea is, and also how important it is to be living by the sea. I love that I can situate myself in the world. I know where I am when I know where the sea is. And that's rare. If you're inland, you can't. And it connects me to the rest of the coast and the continent by knowing where I am, especially like in Africa. Along the coast, it's all one piece. And so I think as I got older, I got more interested in the sea and what it meant to me. And then growing up, my grandfather would tell me a lot of stories, and he would tell me about coming from India to South Africa in 1935. And I used to always say, as a creative, I don't know what I'm still doing in Durban. I don't know if it feels that way in Mombasa, but everybody leaves Durban. If you have any ambition, any creative ambition, you leave to go to the bigger cities. You go to Johannesburg or Cape Town. You don't stay in Durban. And I always say, I don't know why, but I'm stuck in the city. And it's so slow, and it's not moving, and I'm not being nurtured creatively. But I started thinking about it, and I was like, it's also the place where my grandfather came to get new dreams. Like, he came for a new life. The sea brought him, and they literally stayed along a river, which was the Amgeni River, which joins the sea. And I was like, maybe I didn't move like everyone else because I needed to stay where he started his dreams, you know. Maybe it's a reflection of the place where he came to stay is where I'm going to stay. And I don't know if that was a justification in my mind of why I need to be there, but I did link it to the sea. It literally connects me to my history, where I am. And so maybe I should stay in this place and honor that history, or I'm not even doing it purposely, but life is doing it to me and I need to understand why. Okay. So, yeah.
Would you consider coming to visit Khadija in Mombasa?
Of course, my sister city. Of course. I want to. I really want to.
Okay. Johary, your book draws from the Malgache sense of place, of space and the sea in the language of the everyday. Please tell us, how do you go about drawing from the palette of these treasures to inform your work and maybe even to inform your choices in life?
Oh, grande question. Moi, je dois dire aussi que la mer est pour moi un enchantement. Un enchantement dans ma vie personnelle, parce que je viens de vous dire que je viens d'une île, mais je viens des hauts plateaux de Madagascar, c'est-à-dire à 300 km de la mer, et avec les mauvaises routes, ça fait à une journée de route. Et donc j'ai une notion de la mer comme la notion d'un vacancier a de la mer. Lorsqu'on va à la mer, c'est le plaisir, c'est le paradis, c'est les vacances.
So this is a big question. For me, the sea does represent enchantment. And it's very personal for me because I come from the high plateaus of Madagascar. So even though it's an island, it's 300 kilometers where I'm from to get to the coast. And that's actually a day of travel through difficult roads. So the notion of the sea for me is actually of pleasure, of holiday, of paradise.
Mais, la mer représente aussi à Madagascar les origines. Parce que, en fait, l'île ayant été inhabitée avant, tous les Malagasy viennent d'ailleurs et ils sont passés par la mer. Et cette histoire des origines, il y en a qu'on connaît maintenant. D'où est-ce qu'on vient? On dit que les Malagasy viennent d'Austronésie, du côté de la Malaisie et de Bornéo. Il y a aussi des Malagasy qui viennent de l'Arabie, de la Perse, du Perse, mais également de l'Afrique orientale. Et donc, tous les gens qui sont venus à Madagascar sont venus par la mer. Et j'essaie de rendre ça dans ce livre en particulier qui parle des origines et de l'identité. J'essaie de combler les manques de l'histoire écrite par les traditions, mais également par des créations littéraires pour raconter d'où est-ce qu'on vient.
So the sea is integrally linked to the origin story of our people in Madagascar. In fact, the island is thought to have been uninhabited until people traveled through and by the sea to our island from many places. They came from Austronesia, from Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Austronesian islands. They came from Arabia and Persia, and also from the African continent. So all that we are is from the sea. So through my writing, I try and fill the gaps of what we know and what we don't know. So I use traditions and knowledge, but also my own creativity to write that history of our creation through the sea.
I'll stay with you briefly, and it's a question that will be for each one of you as well. What language does your sea speak? And then can you describe a personal experience with the sea that profoundly influenced your writing? And having done that description, please read us an excerpt also from your story.
Merci pour cette question. C'est très intime comme question. Alors, comme je vous disais tout à l'heure, j'ai une notion de la mer, d'un vacancier, en fait, le plaisir d'y aller. Mais j'ai aussi un souvenir très personnel, c'est que j'étais asthmatique quand j'étais enfant. Et en fait, quand j'allais à la mer, l'air de la mer me guérissait. Quand j'ai des crises d'asthme dans les hauts plateaux, l'air de la mer me guérissait. Et donc ces murmures de la mer, dès que j'entends la mer, je me sens beaucoup mieux parce que la première expérience, je n'ai pas cette notion de la première expérience, mais une fois que j'ai su que l'air de la mer me guérissait, rien que l'entendre, je me sentais bien. Donc c'est une murmure, des murmures bienfaisantes, la mer pour moi.
So it's a very intimate question for me to ask me what is the language of the sea. And I have a very personal memory about that because I was asthmatic as a child, and when I was unwell, I would go to the sea to get healed, and the fresh air of the coast would make me feel better. And I would hear the sound of the sea as murmurs. And so now when I think of the sea, and I think of those sounds of the murmurs of the sea, then instantly it makes me feel better, it makes me feel healed.
Oh. Maybe an excerpt? Okay.
So would you read to us?
Okay.
And,
Okay.
So we'll read a little bit in French to give you the flavor of the sounds, and then in English.
La surface de l'eau était vide et lisse. Le ciel s'y reflétait à l'infini. Il n'y avait nul bord où se mirerait une montagne d'argent, des sols pleureurs, ni papyrus, ni sange, ni poussée. Un soleil de plomb régnait sur le vide. Puis, cela remuait un peu, comme si un géant se tournait dans son sommeil sous l'eau. Puis, j'ai vu les immenses oiseaux de bois qui flottaient dessus. Ils ont dû casser leurs ailes.
The water's surface was smooth and blank, Ma. The sky was reflected in it forever. There were no banks where any silver mountains or weeping willows were mirrored from. No papyrus or taro grew there. The sun blazed over the emptiness. Then it started stirring, as if a giant under the water was turning over in its sleep. Then I saw the enormous wooden birds floating on top. They must have broken their wings. Men stood there, women and children too. Not Yetz's children, Ma. They weren't carved from the same wood as us. One man was standing on the head of the largest bird. He was looking at me, Ma. Then he turned to the people behind him. They looked lost on their wounded birds. They didn't move. Their heads were bowed, dazed by the heat. None of them seemed to want to cool off in the water, as if they were afraid of the giant below, afraid that he'd wake, Ma. Have you ever laid eyes on the sea, my child? The sea? What's that? It is the vast expanse of moving waters you dreamed about. The sea. Yes, the sea. Our earth sits in the middle of those swells. The sea. It's salt water. And have you had another dream since then? The old Vizimba was getting carried away. Can I just get to the beat? As Noor followed her shadow to return home, she hummed a tune she had never heard before. Nothing surprised her anymore. Ever since the dream, the most unexpected things had been happening to her. The threads on the loom untangled themselves the moment she stretched out her hand toward them. The jug flew onto her head when she went to collect water from the spring, both on the way there and back. The local boys lowered their eyes when she worked chores with them, and at the market, men turned to look when she passed. She wasn't shedding her blood anymore at every moon. The fourth time, her grandmother had insisted she go see Ma, the midwife. Noor actually found it rather nice. She knew she was changing, like a flower preparing to bloom. Her stomach was not rounding, but it didn't trouble her. After all, no matter what grandmother had said, she'd only dreamed of the stranger. The only slightly disorienting parts were the wet, engulfing emotions, new music, echoes of memory, or tremors of a still faint future. That didn't matter. Noor's strange sensations now had a name: the sea.
Thank you so very much. The same question, what language does your sea speak? And can you describe a personal experience with the sea that profoundly influenced both your life and or your writing? But the excerpt, the reading I will hope that you can do, I'd love you to introduce your jinns to one another. The jinns in your story. The excerpt, so introduce your jinns from the story to one another. But first, what language does your sea speak and your personal experience that you can share?
Okay. Initially, when you asked me this question, I was a bit stumped. So what language does the sea speak? A part of me says the sea knows a language that man doesn't know, but man will understand. So the sea as the body of water or the oceans all around the world seems to be one complete being. But then I realized the places where I've been in different countries where I've seen the sea of Mombasa does not feel like the sea of Lamu. It feels a bit like a sibling, a half brother. It doesn't feel like the sea in, I think, the Kerala area in India, the coast of Kerala, I think. My geography is not very good. But it doesn't feel like that. So I think for my sea, I think it speaks Kiswahili. It must speak Kiswahili. It can speak the other languages, but if it had to speak, it would be through Kiswahili, the language of the fishermen, the drowned, the traders. I think it would remember itself. I belong to Mombasa, and Mombasa belongs to me. So that's how I feel, perhaps. As for an experience with the ocean, I have many experiences, but one I remember, and that it features in some way in the book. It was very impressionable. I think, when you're younger, things maybe you don't remember exactly what's happening, but visuals and certain sensations stick with you. And I remember one time we had gone down to Chuda Water Sports. In Mombasa, we always have the same haunts. They've been there for ages, so everybody knows Chuda Water Sports. And there were fishermen, I don't know what kind, and they had brought all these sharks. There was like, they'd all gone like shark hunting, and there were sharks all over, like set out, dead sharks. And I'd never seen a dead shark live, and not live, dead, in front of me. You know, you wonder, what does its skin feel like? You look at its eyes, there's so much blood. And that impacted me very in my memory. To see something that is from the sea, essentially now be observed on land, it feels very strange. But yeah, I think that was one of the things that I really was fascinated about. And I love sharks very much. They feature prominently in the book. So I drew from that experience a lot. Yeah?
And you accept your
And my accept, let me... I'm so sorry, I've forgotten the page.
Don't worry.
I'll answer the question.
Yeah, let's answer the questions while she looks. Yes.
Thank you so much.
What language does my sea speak? I think for me, the sea speaks a language of longing or desire, just because of the way it moves. It moves forward, like it wants to reach out, and then it pulls back. And there's something very sad about that, like almost reaching for what you want, but then never getting it. And so I feel like it's a language of longing. And then a memory of something important to me at the sea. When you asked me this question a little earlier in the room, the first thought that came to me was I have a memory of, the first memory I have of the ocean is my father holding me on his hip, and the waves are coming, and me thinking, he's so strong. He can save me, you know, like he can save me from anything. The water is like, the water can just like push me away, but like I'm holding on to my father. I can get through this because I'm holding on to him. And it was I think such a strong memory that later on when I also draw, so I was a part of an exhibition about fathers. And I did a drawing of a father and a daughter holding hands, and there's this, I do detailed ink drawing, so there's this whole ocean, like a big wave coming onto you, because life sometimes feels like a big wave and overwhelming, and you need someone there with you. And so I've got this big, huge wave, like in a storm, and these two are facing it together, holding hands. But then I started getting older also, and my father started getting older, and I realized he was just preparing me for the storms. He wasn't going to always be there during the storms. So I took him out of the, I've got two images that I place in the front of that drawing, and I don't keep glass on it so I can change it. To remind,
no, it's fine. I'll carry on. And when he's not always around there, I have a drawing of me facing the ocean by myself, but like remembering that he was there. Just remembering that he was there holding my hand through the storms of the ocean, you know.
Tous les hommes voudraient être votre père, Shubnum. Tous les hommes voudraient être son père.
Everybody would like
To be your father.
No, it's not. It was really beautiful, and thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Shubnum, for truly sharing that. Quite a few of us are also daddy's girls, and our fathers were, I certainly believe my father could hold up the sky, and it's not just facing his age, but also his passing. The world has always felt a little tilted. So thank you for opening your heart to us. Yeah.
Don't worry, I think a lot of us actually really felt that. So, yeah.
So.
Do you want me to read the next one?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, I just had it, and
Now this is enchantment.
something is happening, as Nigerians say, the people in my village.
Let me tell you another sad story.
Okay, pick any. Just pick any. The first one that shows up.
Oh my God. I swear to God, this is so
Eerie.
It's happening. Okay, all right, I got it. So this is a brief, hopefully, a composition, or rather grandstanding from the second monster, which is the Sunken King. He is a host of ships, every ship that has ever floated or dared the ocean, and he steals them out of wrath, and essentially he has reanimated the corpses of these ships. And all of the monsters in the book are very grandstanding. They always want to stand on the podium and tell their stories and say, here I am, and this is what I'm about. So this is the Sunken King, and he says, where do the old contracts manifest? In the old time, in the long days, before Mombasa had a name such as your mouth could pronounce, the coast was wild. The land and the sea had no great separation. They were apart as only two brothers are apart, shared blood and understanding. There was a language between them. The shoreline was not a slash upon which the two were severed, but the very seam, parting only as a mouth does. These two were joined. In the old time, in the long days, the genies of the sea moved freely and spoke and lived among the genies of the land. Sea and land and sky, merely provinces. And then man was created. And what a new thing man was. Newborn, interesting. Prophets came with their flocks spread. They sought living spaces, built, explored, and procreated. They sprouted.
We'll take up the questions. Do you need? You remember the questions, right?
Mais j'ai l'impression faire le parallèle avec la question du voyage. Le voyage comme le voyage physique à de ville, comme changer de temps au fur et à mesure du voyage dans l'existence. Changer de temps au fur et à mesure du voyage dans l'existence, change effectivement les perceptions, parce qu'on connaît plus de choses, on se rend compte des erreurs ou des belles choses qu'on aurait fait, mais en même temps que dans le temps ou dans en changeant de pays. Moi, je voyageais beaucoup et je voyage encore dans les livres. Moi, je voyageais beaucoup et je voyage encore dans les livres. Et au fur et à mesure des livres que je lis, mes perceptions changent. Un autre livre. Ça paraît très simple de dire « emmène à la mer ». Et